Welcome to the Business Rebellion, the podcast for founders and leaders who know something about the way business is done doesn't sit right anymore. Not because they're failing, but because the model is broken. We've been taught that strong leadership looks like control, decisiveness, pressure, pushing through. But what if that model is actually limiting performance, not driving it? Today's conversation is about empathy, but not in the way most people think about it. Not as softness, not as a personality trait, but as a strategic advantage. This is Empathy is a Growth Strategy. My guest today is Daniel Murray. For more than 15 years, Daniel has helped leaders across industries translate empathy into measurable performance, working with organisations including CBA, Fortescue, Mortgage Choice, and the Department of Defence. His work focuses on helping teams connect, communicate, and lead through complexity, not by lowering standards, but by improving how people operate under pressure. What I really value about Daniel's approach is that he blends behavioural science with real-world leadership, making empathy something practical, not abstract. Daniel, welcome to the Business Rebellion.
Hi, Kerrie. Thanks for having me. So good to be with you.
So for people who don't know your work yet, when do leaders usually come to you?
Lots of different times. Often it'll be when they're struggling to get the traction, the performance, the outcomes they want. It's really common when you see teams growing quickly. So often we'll have a team, even a founder who started, and they've got a dozen people that they've maybe built into a team, and they all sit around and they can get together and sort of make decisions quickly. And then as they grow and expand to sort of 20, 50, that becomes much more difficult, because you can't really get to everyone, you can't understand everyone as well, and tension starts to form, divisions start to be created. So it can happen a long way down the track. I work with large organizations, as you mentioned, who have 40,000 staff, but often the challenge is the same one, which is our people aren't really, they're not feeling it, and we're not getting the best out of people. We're not seeing them engaged as much as we'd like. We're not getting the results we want to see through our people. So that's often when I'll get sort of called on in.
So is that typically the only thing that's kind of happening inside that business when empathy becomes necessary, or?
I don't know about you. I've never seen a business only have one issue at a time. The modern world's so complex, right? So there's always lots of competing challenges, and often it'll be elements of that contribute to it. The thing I think I find really interesting with groups of people is when there isn't a huge amount of stress, we can tend to just get along with a bit of kindness, a bit of friendliness, being nice to each other, being polite. You know, if you think about going to the supermarket, you don't have to have a very good relationship with anyone else in that store to be able to get in there, get the stuff you need, and get out. But if there was a problem, if there are shortages, if we saw this during COVID, as soon as there are tensions starting to increase, as soon as the rules of the game start to change dramatically or issues start to happen, that lack of relationship causes instant issues. You know, we saw people punching each other over toilet paper during COVID. And so inside an organization, the way I think about this is when things are actually fine, when we've got tailwinds, when sales are high, when things are easy, often we sort of don't worry about those relationships. We don't think they're that important because it seems to be going okay. Add a little bit of stress, add a new system or a new process, add a restructure or some headwinds, right? Some economic headwinds, and suddenly you'll see those relationship fragilities start to become massive cracks. And again, that's where I'll often come in to say, well, actually, let's not just solve those individual problems that are happening. How about we build this foundation around relationships and the humans and how we connect, so that whenever those new things come, we've got some sort of resilience in this really important foundation.
Yeah, I like that, because especially in this age of AI, right, the relationships are going to becomes so much more important.
Absolutely. And in many ways, one, because I was speaking with some financial brokers for a conference this week, and an issue that comes up quite regularly is this balance between transactional scale and individual intimacy. It's almost impossible to have both. And so if I'm a big bank or a financial institution, I'm really pushing towards how do I get this scaled efficiency happening in these transactions that I have? Because if I can get this transaction volume and have my margin in between, then I can create a really good business. On the other side of that coin, if we look at a mortgage broker, their business is very different. This is how do I have individual intimacy in relationships with individual humans so that they feel like they're not a number in this big machine, that they're cared about, they're looked after, and they're understood. And AI will help a lot with this. There is some suggestion that it'll help with some of this, and maybe it will, but I think it'll help on this side by freeing up our time. I think it'll help with the intimacy by freeing up the humans from having to do all that transactional noise and spend more time with the individual humans. And I think it's really incumbent on us as we step into an AI future to pull apart what's going to be the work that humans are going to be doing. What's the work that AI we definitely want it to do? What's the work we definitely don't want it to be doing? And really starting to understand what those boundaries are. And again, empathy will be this skill to understand the human elements underneath all of that noise that's going to be going on.
Yeah, and there is going to be a lot of noise, and a lot of business owners still kind of associate empathy with like softness or even lower standards. So where does that belief kind of fall apart, right? Because it's not, obviously.
Well, yeah, let's talk about why we think it is. I think people think it's a soft skill because we largely associate empathy with emotions. And often there's this sort of thought in business that, well, let's put emotions aside and just focus on the mechanics. Now, as a mathematician by my undergraduate degree, I studied pure and applied mathematics. I love the mechanics. Happy. Sounds good. Appreciate it. The challenge is the way most humans make decisions is not very logical or mechanical, right? It's not. If you go and ask someone what car they purchased, I guarantee you the number one factor wasn't it was the most effective vehicle I could purchase for the lowest possible price. If that was the case, we wouldn't see a whole variety of cars that exist today on the roads. They wouldn't exist. We make decisions largely based on emotion. We base a lot of our decision making, and a lot of our actions are based on emotional drivers. And so if we forget about empathy being how do I make you happy and how do I make you feel safe, and instead think empathy is understanding why people do what they do. Why do they make those decisions? What are the drivers of those decisions? What are the underlying decision-making processes that go on, both logical and illogical, or rational and emotional? What are those different drivers of decisions, and how can I understand all of that more effectively? The other thing I think we get wrong with empathy is we think if you're sad, I have to feel sad to empathize with you. And I think that's not necessarily true. I have to understand what's going on. I have to understand why you might be sad. I have to understand what's going on in your environment and inside of you. But I don't have to feel that to understand or have a better understanding of it. And so from a business and leadership perspective, I don't want people to think empathy is coddling or making it all better. I don't have to make you not feel sad to empathize with you. I'd have to understand what's going on. And if I do want to help you, but I try and do it without any understanding, and this is what happens for a lot of businesses, I see a problem I think exists. I don't really understand it, but gee, I'm just going to throw some solutions at it because I want to help. And they don't land. People don't buy it. They don't pick it up. It doesn't actually solve that person's problem. Sometimes it really irritates them. And we sit back and go, oh, I don't understand why that didn't work. It's because we didn't understand the other person first. We didn't actually understand what was going on. And so this is empathy. If we just try and strip back the definition, empathy is understanding why do people do what they do? What's going on over there? What's driving that? What's happening? If I can understand that, then maybe I can help influence, make better decisions, support them. Maybe I can make some money out of this. Maybe I can build a business out of this. Maybe I can realize that it's not a place I can help and I can step away gracefully, but I can understand which decision to make because I get it.
Well, you have more information, right, when you have that empathy and the curiosity to ask the questions about what's going on and get to the root cause of what is actually going on. You know, more information always makes better decisions generally. So,
generally,
how does empathy? Yeah, go.
No, I was just going to say, there's so many examples through history of trying to understand the dynamics of what was going on, and really looking at trying to use that understanding to make better decisions. So, Ford Motor Vehicles is a great example. They were trying to get their engineers to design better cars for pregnant women. The engineers didn't get it. Now, the engineers were largely male, and what they did was they gave them these empathy bellies. So what they are is they're a large suit that simulates pregnancy. So it's big and it's heavy and it hangs on your front, and they're full of water, so they move around weird and they're hot. And they put these suits on these men and said, now get in and out of these cars. And as soon as they did that, they went, oh my God, these cars are terrible. We have to redesign them. And so, if you're going to design, if you're going to understand, if you're going to make products for children, you should realize that the children don't buy them. You're actually selling to parents. So what do the parents care about, and how do I understand the dynamics that are going on there to make better decisions?
Yeah. And how does empathy actually strengthen leadership authority instead of weaken it, would you say?
If I wanted to get, if I think about leadership, my objective is scale. So my objective is to take the influence that I can have and increase that scale through people. So, I think sometimes we make it really complicated in terms of leadership, but essentially leadership is my influence adding into 5, 6, 10, whatever it is, people, and then their impact on the other side of that becoming so much greater because of the influence and the ability I have to support those people to do their job well. So to do that, I have to do a couple of things. One, I have to set really clear direction and make sure everyone understands that direction. And the second thing I do is have to get the best productivity or performance out of each of those individual people. Now, if I can understand you as a human, and I know what drives you, what you care about, what's important to you, if I understand what are the factors that make you happy, that make you excited, that make you frustrated, and if I understand all of those things as individual aspects of you, then it helps me to better design the way this system works so that you can each day bring your best. I use the analogy, I've got a big market garden in my front yard, as anyone who's seen my Facebook or social media will know, and I grow lots of vegetables. When my tomatoes aren't growing well, I don't yell at them because it doesn't help, right? I've tried. You can yell at them as much. They don't grow better when you yell at them. No, what you do is you go, well, what do tomatoes need? What are the situations? What's the environment? Is it the soil? Is it too wet or not wet enough? Is it disease that could be impacting them? What's going on around it? Are they getting enough sun and not enough sun? Too much sun? What's going on around the tomato plants? If I can get the environment right for them, they do what they do best. I get the best out of them. And I think for leaders, it's a similar thing. How do I understand that each of my people are different people? How do I understand that they need slightly different things at different times? And if I can understand that and then give them that, they'll do what they do best. The second aspect is that direction piece. So how do I make sure I explain what we're trying to achieve, where we're trying to go, why this is important in a way that they can connect with and they can buy into? And again, that will be slightly different for each person. It might be a different conversation. It might be different emphasis at different times. And we know this through great leaders is that they really support each individual to bring the best out in that individual. And that's where that makes so much sense, and everyone goes, yes, I want to do that. I want to be that leader for my people. But the step before you're able to do that is you have to understand the person. You got to know about that person. You got to understand what drives them, what they care about, and that's the empathetic work you have to do first. That's where we have to be understanding and curious.
That makes sense. You can't just throw, not everyone is, they used to do this a lot in corporate when I was there, that when it came around to review time, everyone just got a pay rise or they got a bonus or whatever it may be. But that wasn't always what drove everyone. There was a lot of mums who would rather have flexibility than extra cash. There was, there's a lot of different things that drive different people. I think that one thing corporate generally does, from my experience, is cookie cutter. Everything's the same. They don't do that at all. They don't consider the person. It's just, here's our rules, here's the process, that's it.
Yeah, it's the scale versus intimacy we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Right. So I worked at a big corporate, and each year there was a Christmas gift everyone got, and one year I think it was like a CD of Australian greatest hits or something. Right. I never listened to that CD. Sometimes it'd be barbecue tongs with the logo on the side, and again, there was probably a small percentage of people who went, awesome, I love barbecue tongs, but you could guess the vast majority didn't care all that much. So why do they do that? Like you said, it's not just cookie cutter, but it's, well, how can I do something that's fair, i.e. everyone gets exactly the same thing, and I can do it at scale where it's going to be cost effective, right? And then I've ticked a box that said everyone's got a gift. I would go right back to the start and say, why the hell are we doing this? Oh, we want people to feel appreciated. Okay, cool. Well, once you've put it through these hoops, who appreciates this? Almost nobody. I can guarantee you there's no one who stands in front of someone and goes, let me tell you about these tongs I got once. That's not a story anyone's ever going to be telling. The story people do tell, though, I had an example where a gentleman I was working with, he wanted to reward one of his staff. His employee, his son, was trying out for a rep footy team. And so the manager said to his employee, hey, look, you've had an outstanding month. I'm so proud of the work you've done. It's been amazing. I know your son's got that trial on Friday afternoon. Take the afternoon off. Just don't worry about it. Just go and spend your time with your son. I want you to go and, see how he goes in the trial. Now, how much would that be worth? Well, I don't know. Could you have given him an amount of money that would have compensated for that experience? Of course not. But it also demonstrates I understand what you care about. I've had people ask me, well, how am I meant to know if my employees have got a son playing football? And so, well, you bloody well ask them and have conversations with them, and you find out what they care about. When they talk about something and their face lights up and they get excited, you remember it and then you take action on it, because that's where all the meaning is. That's where people will get that sense of they feel understood, they feel heard, they feel cared about.
Yeah, and it makes a big difference when you're trying to scale. People feel that.
It's vital.
Yeah, that's it. So you talk sometimes about nervous system safety. What does that actually mean in a leadership context, do you think?
Yeah, safety is one of these things. There's a lot of, in heavy industry, for example, safety's got really specific context and meaning. The word psychological safety is very popular and is used a lot now, and it is an important thing. I think for you as a leader, you've got to be really conscious of how much do they trust you as the first element of safety? Because if that doesn't exist, then a whole bunch of the other things become window dressing. If I can't speak up to you, if I can't call things out, then what happens, often people will talk about unsafe workplaces, and they'll talk about all the controls and the mechanical pieces, but really None of those things are the problem. The problem is that people can see those things are an issue, but they don't say anything about it because they're worried about how you as a leader will respond. And so I think from a safety perspective, there's lots of elements, but the first thing I'd say is be approachable, be consistent, be someone that they can disagree with, they can argue with, they can challenge. And there's one particular type of leader that I worry about a lot, the Jekyll and Hyde leader. Have you worked with a Jekyll and Hyde leader, Kerrie? The way this person works...
Yes.
Yes, yeah, okay. The way this person works is most of the time they're really nice. They're lovely, they're friendly, they say good morning and they bring cupcakes. Most of the time. Every now and then, usually with a bit of pressure and stress, they explode. Right? Something terrible happens, they go off the handle, they're a total nightmare to be around. And again, I'm pretty confident most people have encountered someone like this. The problem with that leader is, in their mind, the story is most of the time I'm pretty good. Most of the time I'm excellent. I do all these things. I tick all these boxes that people tell me I should tick. I say good morning. I've got a coach. They tell me to be nice to people. I do all that stuff. Cool. Tick the box. The story in their head, most of the time, everything's fantastic. The story in everyone else's head is, I never know what I'm going to get. I just don't know what's going to show up. It could flip it. I don't know who's going to show up to the next conversation and when it might change. And so in their minds, high levels of uncertainty, and they make decisions based on this uncertainty. Should I go into their office and have a conversation or send an email? I'll send an email. Should I challenge in the meeting and disagree, or should I just let it go? I'll let it go. Right? And because it's safer. And this is where people don't realize that safety is not, again, don't create psychological safety because HR's told you to. Create psychological safety, create this environment where people can speak up, because when they don't speak up, you're all dumber. When they don't challenge, you're missing things you need to hear about. And that's far more dangerous for everyone in the long run. And so I like to make sure that, when we talk about things like psychological safety, we talk about things like diversity and empathy. Let's stop thinking about them like they're these like cherry on top add-ons that we can put in there to make things a bit nicer, and see that actually when we get these things wrong, the very core of our business becomes weakened and we fail.
It always kind of, and I know you and I have spoken about this a couple of times. For me, it's always come back to just being a good human. Like, we shouldn't need, if you are being a good human, then yes, I know we have to have these policies and processes in a business, but if you're a good human first, then they are window dressing because they're not required, because you're already doing it naturally. And I just think that it's so sad that we don't have that as much as we should.
So let's talk about why we don't. We don't have that as much as we should. I think there's two simple reasons that come to mind straight away. One, define good. Right? Because good human is a very subjective definition, and it's broad, and there's no universal sense of what that means. And look, there's people who try to do it. There are people who will say, well, they're religious and therefore that's the center of their goodness. And then I would say, I'll show you some religious people who aren't meeting those same standards, and maybe that's not the only thing we need to do. But so there's the definitional issue. But the second issue is what I would call the plausible story or the plausible narrative problem. In your head, you're creating this narrative about what's going on in the world. Much like our Jekyll and Hyde leader, they would say, I'm actually being a good human. But most of the time, I'm good. And they create this plausible narrative that says, sometimes things happen, but they're not my fault. And most of the time, I'm good. And see, I'm a good human. The question for a leader is not what's your plausible narrative. What are the narratives going on in the heads of everyone else? Be more fascinated with those narratives. And sometimes you'll see parts of those narratives really conflict with yours. You're like, well, I had to cancel your one-on-one yesterday because I had this big client meeting. It was really important. So it's obvious that I'm not a bad person. It was just the right choice to make. They look at that same situation and go, all right, I'm not actually that important to you, am I? You chose something else over me. Clearly, I'm not that important. Actually, you made Mary's one-on-one last week, and there was a client thing then, but you cancelled mine today. Therefore, this is actually a me problem. And again, you can sit there and go, well, you're wrong, but it's not about right and wrong. It's about actually, how can I understand how that would look for you? And how do I lean into that story and go, gee, that story isn't a great story. And that's valid. I get it. And I've got to think about these decisions in that context as well. It doesn't mean you're not going to have to make some tough decisions. It might mean you have to come back and say, look, I'm really disappointed I had to make that decision. I want to make it better. I want to acknowledge that that would have been a really shitty thing for you to have to deal with. Like that, I think it's leaning into that reality, their reality, that makes a huge difference in how we sort of frame those decisions. Because you can see that how many times would I have to just ignore their narrative and keep on mine to still feel like I'm a good person, but for them to look at me and go, you're not at all.
Yeah, it's true. It is very subjective. So, how much does a leader's internal state actually impact team performance? And what do teams feel when the leaders don't say
anything? How we show up is the first signal we give to people as to the temperature of the environment, what's going on around us. It sets the tone. And one thing we don't really appreciate, because we don't think about it, we only feel it, is when other people have an emotion, we notice it straight away and it impacts on us. Right? If you're sitting in a team meeting, everyone's sitting around and we're having a chat and everyone's nice and it's fun and things are going on, and the manager walks in and they're frazzled and they look a bit agitated, it immediately puts everyone on alert, right? Doesn't it? It's just, we all have felt this before, like, whoa, something's up, what's going on? And in a workplace, when there's so much complexity going on, that then feeds into everyone else's little story that's going on. And that huge amount of complexity means that some people will start to really freak out. They'll make poorer decisions based on you. Now, you might be walking in agitated because you just got off the phone to your manager who said something really stupid or horrible or whatever, right? It might have nothing to do with this meeting at all, or it might not impact any of the people in the meeting. Maybe you just ate a bad sandwich and you got some gas and that's what's called, like, whatever. But what you don't think about is they pick up on your attitude instantly and it impacts on them. And so I think there's a couple of things I'd recommend here. One, being more conscious about how you actually feel, being more in control of that. Don't be sort of the dog being wagged by the tail, right? Okay, look, I'm feeling really stressed at the moment. I'm about to go into a meeting. I don't want to take that in there. So what can I do to just calm down a bit, or reflect on that a bit, or just get in the right headspace for this next meeting because I want to have this impact? The second thing you can do is just be honest with people. Go in and say, I'm here. Look, I'm just, before we start, I just want you to know I've just come out of whatever it was. It didn't go how I hoped. I'm feeling a bit agitated by it, but I'm not agitated at you or about this meeting. I'm really excited about this meeting. But if you're seeing this going on, you know what's happening. And again, people go, oh, is that fragility or weakness or vulnerability? I go, no, it's just honesty. It's honesty, transparency, and it gives people context so they can make better decisions and not think you're a weirdo.
And not turn it into some other story.
Not turn it into some other story, which we do all the time.
We are the best story writers ever.
Yeah, essentially your whole reality is just a narrative that you're creating in your head second by second. Everyone else is creating a narrative too. Of course, we are designed to think ours is right and yours is just a version of right. But everyone's is right to them, to their own selves. And so the more we can learn to understand other people's stories and other people's plausible narratives, the better.
Yeah. So how do you maintain high standards without creating fear? And what's the difference between accountability and intimidation?
The first thing around high standards is clarity, and as much as you can, objective clarity. So if I say to people, hey, we need to be faster, in my head, I've got a sense of what that means, but there's no objectivity as to, other than not as, at a shorter time than we're doing now, maybe, but like there's no real objectivity as to how clear that is. If I said to you, can you write me a report? Your head should go to, about what? How long will it be? When do you want it by? What sort of context is in there? Who's the audience? There's 100 questions that you should be asking. When we're busy and tired and stressed, we forget to add all those bits in. Now, you can't hold people accountable. You can't hold people accountable for things they don't know. That's not fair. And I think whenever you're trying to create accountability, trying to add as much clarity and be as clear and obvious and direct as you can is important. And I think the intimidation part tends to come when we haven't got the clarity early, but we try and retrofit it later. Hey, look, I wanted that faster. Why is it taking so long? I need it now. That's very different from, hey, we agreed it was going to be due Friday. It's Friday. How are you going? When can I expect to see this thing? That's not necessarily intimidation. The other thing is when we want to, even when we're giving feedback or following up, ask yourself, when I have this conversation with the person, how do I want them to feel at the end? What do I want them to be thinking, feeling, and doing when I stop having the conversation? Now, again, if I, let's say you needed to meet a deadline, it was coming up, and I had a pretty good sense that you weren't going to make it. If I'm going to have a conversation with you, and I talk to you in a way that at the end you feel belittled, you feel frustrated, you feel more anxious than you did before, what expectation should I have of whether you're going to be able to meet that deadline well or not? Like, it should go down. Those are not emotions or feelings set up for you to succeed. If you're doing it out of fear, it can be a driver in some ways, but often it makes people cut corners and do silly things. If I thought, I'm going to have a conversation with you, at the end of it, I want you to feel like, I want you to feel very determined, supported. I want you to feel like it's really important to still make this deadline, and I want you to feel really encouraged and empowered to push through and make this work. Okay, cool. So what I need to now think of is, when I have the conversation with you, every word I say has to help us get to that state. And any word I say that helps push you in that other direction is not going to be helpful. Now, that puts all the onus back on me as a leader to think, who are you? What do you care about? What do you respond to well? And how do I make sure I'm going to take you on that path? There are some people you will be able to be incredibly direct with, and you'll be able to speak to in a certain way, and they'll respond well to that, and that'll get them to that place of empowered, encouraged, and ready to go. There'll be some people where the same words would push them in the opposite direction. How do you know the difference? You understand your people. You practice empathy often. You really get to know them. You find out which works in which situation, and you adapt to fit the outcome you're trying to achieve. That's the job of a leader, and that's why it's hard, because it's complex and different. Often people will say to me, I run sessions on giving hard feedback. What words do I use? Oh, it doesn't matter. If they don't trust you, it doesn't matter what words you use. The words you use will depend on them and on how well you understand them.
It's very funny. I had an experience with a trainer once who, in the gym, much better if they tell me I can't do it, but he was a very supportive trainer, and he was like, yeah, keep going, you can do it. And I'm like, that is not helping. Not at all. I said, you need to tell me I can't do this shit. And then all of a sudden, I go, just give it a go for me, will you please? And he did. And then I smashed it because he told me I couldn't do it. And it's funny how, but in other circumstances, I'd be the complete opposite.
Yeah. And, we see it with sports coaches. Some of them yell and scream at their players. Some of them show disappointment sometimes. They're quiet. Watch out when they're quiet. Others, watch out when they're angry. And these are different. These styles have different impacts on different players at different times. The best coaches, the best leaders, they know their people well enough to know what's going to work in what situation, and then they adapt and they do the hard work to make sure they're the right person for their people. They're the right leader for their people at the right time.
Yeah. No, it's good. And so something that kind of comes up a lot in this audience is the emotional isolation of leadership, right? So it gets very lonely at the top. And what do founders underestimate about that? And how does unprocessed stress show up in a culture and team behavior over time?
So I think it sort of comes back to this idea of vulnerability we touched on. Sometimes leaders think, particularly in founders space, that I've got to have all the answers. I've got to have all my shit together all the time. I can't show any weakness. I can't show any signs that things are going wrong. Firstly, really hard to hide. And hiding it often is hard on you, right? It's often quite stressful to try and hide it all the time because, when you're trying to, which person am I trying to show up as here? It takes a lot of mental stress and energy. But the other thing is that people don't believe it. We don't trust him, perfect and invulnerable. We trust people who are real and honest. And, often I'll say to leaders, if you want to build a really trusting team, then just be really transparent with them about what's going on. We hire adults, put them in a business, and then pretend they're like idiots or children that we have to protect from the dangers of the world, when we've hired them to help us to navigate through those dangers. We've hired them to help us try and overcome these challenges, and then we try and make sure, don't tell them that the cash flow is a bit tight this month because people will get worried. Well, they should be getting worried because cash flow is tight. Why is it all on your shoulders? Now, it's not to tell them so they freak out and run away. It's to tell them the reality so that they can trust that you're in this together and that you're feeling that stress. And it gives them context for the decisions you might make. It gives them context for the way you might be feeling. And it can help teams to rally together. The other side is, I think, particularly for leaders who feel alone, good news is there's lots of other leaders who also feel alone. Build your tribe, find your network. Go and talk to other people. What you'll find is you'll go to talk to these networks and there's some really good ones. You and I are part of a brilliant network where you'll go to those people and go, oh my God, this is going on. They go, oh, yeah, me too. Or, I went through that last year. That really sucks. Let me tell you some of the things that worked for me. Maybe they'll help you. Have you thought about this? Do you want to just grab lunch and chat it out? Right? It doesn't have to be lonely. The world, this whole idea that you can't show vulnerability anywhere else because it's dog eat dog and we're all out to get it, that's all bullshit. Right? Most people are here just trying to do their best. They want to help each other to get along, and they know you're a human and that things are hard. So I think showing vulnerability, both internally and externally, is something we could do better and do more of.
And it's something that I've tried to be really open with since I first started my business and put team members on, because a lot of the team members that I brought on, they came on in like casual capacity, and I said, they took a bet on me. They left full-time employment, took a bet on me. So I said, I can't promise. I said, but I can promise I will do everything within my power to build and scale this business so that we are all safe. And I have done that since day dot. And, and what it has done, which is a perfect example of what you're talking about, is that when there has been times when there's been dips, people will take the hit just as much as I take the hit. And we all do it together because we all know where we're going, and we all know we all want it to succeed, and we will all put in the effort that we need to do that to go forth and make it all happen. And, this year, as you know, has been particularly difficult for me personally. We've had a lot of ups and downs with, lost our house and things like that. But the team has just rallied. And I may not have been as transparent through that entire process because I had a lot of, trying to find a house with a roof over my family's head. But, the team have just rallied. They've supported, they've taken the lead on things that I've had to let go of because I've been dealing with outside influences. And I think it's a really good example of what you're trying to get across in a large scale capacity. And it's always been something that I found really important. I don't do the, everyone gets a pay rise. I do the, okay, what's more important to you? And if that means you want to learn this skill and go that way, let's see how I can support you to do that. And that's been a really important thing for me as a leader.
Yeah, I love that. I think, a good example that I've been part of many times, and particularly at some scale, I've done some very large cost reduction programs back in my corporate days. And I just think of it simply. If I said to everyone, hey, we've got to cut costs, and can you help me find some ways in which we could cut those costs? One of the things people would probably say is, well, let's just scrap the biscuits out of the tea room. Let's just cut all these little things. And if we could cut a whole bunch of these little things and save someone's job, let's absolutely do it. If instead I just went to my team and I said, we're getting rid of biscuits, they'd go, what? I'm not even worth a biscuit? You. Right? They'd be really upset because I'm not giving them any transparency as to the context and the decision I'm actually making in my head, which is it's either this or it's something else. And again, being honest and vulnerable with people to go, gee, this is hard. What are your ideas? It puts all those things in context and people can help you make better decisions. And what they'll probably do is they'll go, actually, there's this thing going on. Or someone will go, you know what, I've been thinking about only working 3 days anyway. What if I cut back to 3 days? What impact would that have on the cost base? And I go, that would help. Right? But again, we take these decisions away from people thinking we're protecting them, and actually we're damaging ourselves and our organization.
Mm. It's fascinating when you do it in that state, how much everyone bands together. And I really like that because it creates such a sense of culture that you can't manufacture.
Yeah. And, we sometimes worry, we go, oh, but what about the people who'll take advantage? They'll show up like a sore thumb, and then you can make a good decision as to whether they're actually the people that are the right fit for this. And sometimes they'll not want to be part of it, and you go, okay, I appreciate that. I get that. This is how it's going to have to be, though. This is where we're going forward. So maybe this isn't the right place, and let me help you find somewhere else. Again,
yeah, absolutely.
Parting ways is not. Sometimes parting ways is the most empathetic thing you can do, right? And sometimes helping them move on is what they need.
It's the best for both people sometimes. Yeah. Well, there's no use
absolutely
trying to get them to stay in a place where they're unhappy. If it doesn't fit what they need and their needs, it doesn't help either side of that point.
You won't get the best of them, and they will impact on everyone else in your team. Because everyone else in your team wants to be surrounded by people who buy in and get it and care and are passionate. And one person, there's this old saying, if you get a bowl of strawberries, how many cockroaches do you need to put in before you won't eat any of those strawberries? Not just one, right? One can spoil the whole lot real quick.
Yeah.
And so we have to be very conscious in our teams that we might have a really wonderful culture and things are going great. And for whatever reason, one of those people or a new person comes in and they don't fit anymore, they can spoil it all really quickly if we don't take that sort of decisive action. And it's not to be cruel. It's not to just throw people away. We could talk about that for a lot, but it's about being clear on what is the path forward, what are we trying to build here, and that takes transparency and honesty.
And it's a standard that you set with the ways of working within the company that you're creating and the culture that you've created. And if it's a training issue, you can fix that. But if it's not, then sometimes it's just not the right fit. And cancer spreads really quick when it's like that.
Absolutely does.
So often.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the thing, 100%, the thing I always think about there is, if I'm really passionate and committed and someone else is dragging their heels, I will feel frustrated. It's not fair. Like, and that impacts me straight away. And if you as a leader ignore how that's impacting me, let alone, you might think, oh, we'll just let them go because I don't want to have a tough conversation with the person who's letting us all down. But that's impacting me as well. It's not just them. And again, this is where empathy is being in touch with all of your people to see what's really going on for all of them. And that's so important.
And it's not just the people in the team, right? Like for us, we do a lot of fractional work with clients. Mm-hmm. It's also the clients. So it's not the first time that I've let clients go based on how they treat my team, which is unacceptable behaviour in my eyes. So I've gone, no, that's it, we're done. Yeah, I just won't work with clients that are like that.
Yeah, I think it's a good call. It's important, right?
Yeah, it's just as effective. Like, it's just as impactful putting them in that situation and expecting them to just have to put up with it. It's the whole reason they left, the places that they left in the first place.
That's right. Yeah. And again, your team wants you to be looking out for them and supporting them in all those different directions. That's part of the role of a leader. That's part of what we want and need from you.
So if you could leave leaders with one mindset shift around empathy and growth, what would it
be? Stop being nice and start being kind. Stop being focused on making people happy and instead start creating the environment they need to be really effective. And so I think one easy way to think about this is harmony versus effectiveness. You often have to make choices about what you're going to prioritize. And there's lots of times in our lives where we say, I'm going to prioritize harmony. I'm going to keep the peace. I'm not going to say anything. And, like sometimes at the family barbecue, that's a really smart play. Don't tell Uncle Jeff that he's a racist or whatever it might be, right? But sometimes we should prioritize harmony. Yeah, poor Jeff. But sometimes we should definitely prioritize harmony. But in workplaces, effectiveness is what keeps us alive. Effectiveness is what keeps the lights on, everyone gets paid, and clients are happy. All those things come through effectiveness. And so every time we prioritize harmony by, I won't say anything, I won't have the tough conversation, I won't pull that person up, I won't hold them accountable, I'll let that stuff go, it damages effectiveness. And it doesn't take long to think, how many times do I do this before this effectiveness starts to really erode? And we do have challenges, we do have cost problems, we do have lack of clients, all those other things start to manifest, which make it much, much harder on the team. Stress goes up, and then we keep prioritizing, I won't say anything because I want to keep the peace. This is a downward spiral that is really, really toxic and can cause really deep sort of scars for organizations. So I think treating people like adults, understanding what's going on for them, but being clear in doing that, I'm prioritizing what's best for us to move forward, not because I want to be nice or not because I want to be cruel. I want to be kind, right? Our ability to keep working together, to have this job, to build this business, to create all the things we're trying to create is going to be predicated on us getting these outcomes. And so I have to have this conversation. It's not fun. I don't love it. It might not feel good, but we have to have this conversation because I care about you and I want to understand what's going on so I can make good decisions for us to be effective, not just to have somewhere nice where we can share cupcakes once a month. Let's prioritize effectiveness over harmony, but that doesn't mean we become tyrants and process driven. We build effective relationships.
Yeah. Don't you say I can't be process driven to an operations person?
You can be.
She can be process driven and kind, right?
You can. No, absolutely. This is not an or. This is have really good processes, but your business isn't paint by numbers. Processes alone are great. It's just that there's humans that fit in between all those processes, and when they want to, they can mess any of them up at any point. So
yes.
Don't underestimate the ability for a great plan to be undermined by human relationships.
100%.
And so your job as a leader is to build both.
Yeah, I like it.
They should hire you to build the processes, Kerrie. Get you to build all the processes, then they can focus on the relationships. Happy partnership, happy life.
Perfect. See, easy days. This is what we do. So, Daniel, this has been such a powerful conversation. What really stands out for me is that empathy isn't about being nicer, it's about leading better. It's about creating the conditions where people can actually perform consistently, sustainably, and without unnecessary pressure. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks, Kerrie.
And for everyone else, this is the Business Rebellion, and this is what it sounds like to do business differently.